just so you could start to get more comfortable with not only the animation tools, but more specifically the curve editor. Let's say we go ahead and get started. Now the idea here is to animate this one step at a time. We'll go ahead and start by blocking in the animation with the turret's swivel control and the pitch control. And then later we'll add animation to the legs, and then to finish up we'll add some follow through in the turret's wire. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll turn on auto key. We'll also decide on a frame range. I think we can work with about 32 frames. I'll hold down Control Alt and drag with the right mouse button over to our right so we can start to remove some frames, and we'll end at 32. Alright, sweet. So from here we'll get started by creating our first pose on frame 0. Let's make sure we have the swivel control selected. We'll go ahead and check our key filters. We'll go ahead and make sure this is set to position, and we'll create a key. Let's go ahead and clone this over to frame 32. We know how to do that. Let's hold down Shift and drag. Sweet. And there we have it. Alright, so once we've done that, now it's time to basically block in the animation. So let's do this. We'll have the turret move down just a few frames after. Let's say on about frame 4. Let's grab our move gizmo and we'll drop it just slightly. And then after we've done that, we'll want to bring it down a little bit more for a type of moving hold. That way we can animate some build up to the jump. I mean, it's going to leave its feet, so we need to make that convincing. So let's go to about frame 13 and we'll go ahead and drop the turret down a little bit more. Great. And now a few frames after that, we'll have it leap from the floor. So we'll go to frame 21 and we'll bring it up. Yes, there's a bit of locking in the legs, but we'll fix that later. So it jumps up. We'll eventually have it hold, and we'll use our tangency to do that. Again, we get as far as we can with our tangents, and if we absolutely need to, we add a keyframe then. Nice. And now what we can do is basically work on having it land. So let's go to about frame 29, and I'll bring it down so it's a bit lower than the key on frame 32. That way we get a bit of a recoil when this plays through. So watch this. When we hit play, there's our jump, and we have a really nice recoil. How cool is that? Awesome. So now it's time to block in the rotation. So let's go ahead and grab our pitch control, and with that selected, we'll grab our rotate gizmo. Let's check our key filters. Feel free to keep on any one of these properties. You don't have to keep switching it out. But keep in mind that if you have an extra property checked, you might be adding more keyframes than you need to. For a light animation like this, it's really not a big deal. I'm just trying to get you more familiar with how to animate with clean practices. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and uncheck position. I'll turn on rotation. Sweet. And as we've done before, let's go ahead and create our key on 0. We'll hold down Shift and drag to bring the key over to 32. Nice. Now let's go ahead and think about follow through here. So as the turret starts to move down, we can have the weapon start to rotate up for a bit of follow through. And as we do that, let's think about the intensity here, or the amount of movement we have from the turret center, because that will determine how much rotation we add to the weapon. So that will affect our follow through, of course. Alright, so as we start to move forward in the animation, I've just rotated up slightly on 3. Let's go ahead and continue. And it looks like on about frame, let's say on about frame 9, we can have it rotate down for a bit of overlap. Let's go ahead and take a look at our timing here. Great. And then we'll go ahead and bring it back up. It's almost like we're animating a little bit of a recoil. So in frame, let's say on about 14, I'm going to go ahead and bring this up just a little bit. And that way, when we animate our next pose, it's more noticeable. So the next pose is, of course, having the weapon rotate down even further due to the amount of force in the jump. So we'll have that happen on about frame 17. I'm going to rotate it down. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and take a look. So there you go. From the pose alone, you can see how forceful the jump is. Nice. And now we need to have the weapon rotate up for a bit of overlap. So as the weapon starts to move down, that's when it should start to rotate up. We can have that happen on about frame 28. Awesome. And then it will settle on 32. Let's go ahead and hit play. Cool. So we get some recoiling action from that as well. How exciting. But still, it kind of looks a little weightless. It needs some more TLC, right? So here's what we'll do. We'll stop the lesson here. In the following lesson, I'm going to go ahead and show you how, which helps the audience understand what the character is doing or thinking. We'll also have moving holds in, let's say, anticipation. So just before a jump, in this case, we can have the model go into a down position where there is a bit of a build-up to the main action, which is the leap. Or let's say if someone's throwing a ball, we'll have a moving hold where the pitcher, or whoever is throwing the object, kind of rears up, holds for a second, and then lets go. So we want to make sure that we have this in animation so that we can start to have our performance feel more natural. So let's go ahead and do this. We'll grab our swivel control and head over to our curve editor. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to add moving holds without having to add any extra keys. The last thing we want to do is go ahead and right click and choose add keys and start to add keys all over the place and try to tweak the animation. This type of workflow is going to get really messy. So you can see I've tried to quickly add a hold here when the character jumps into the air, but you can see how snappy that looks, how rough the animation is. So let's go ahead and clear out those keys. I'll go ahead and jump back to the curve editor. I'll just go ahead and undo back. Much better. Now, let's go ahead and right click and make sure we're using the Move Keys tool. I'll now grab the keyframe on 21. And we know that we can go ahead and start to drag at our tangency to change the F-curve shape. And this is one way we can create our moving hold, by dragging this out a bit more so that we hold in this pose on 21 for a little bit longer. That's just one way. Let me go ahead and reset the tangent. Another way is to right click on top of the keyframe to get to our key info panel. So this lets us do all sorts of things. Notice we can not only change the timing of our keyframe by using the time parameter, but we can change the value of it as well. And we can change our tangency. So notice from this, you can see that we're working with auto by looking at our two rollouts. But we can change this to stepped if we'd like. Take a look at what happens now. I've now set the out tangent to stepped. So this is going to be very blocky when the turret falls. So again, this is a really neat tool set here. I'm going to go ahead and switch this back to auto though, because that's really rough. Let's say we now click on advance, and here's what I want to point out to you. You'll notice that you can access your tangent properties by using the in and out parameters here. So watch this. If we were to go ahead and set the tangent to spline, or custom as what it was called in earlier versions of Max, you'll now notice that we have access to our tangent properties. So if we wanted to, we can adjust the orientation by using the top two properties. And then the channels underneath allow us to stretch our tangency. So what you can do is go ahead and add a hold and figure out the exact value you're using on that hold on one half. And then you can just go ahead and copy your value here and paste it on the opposite side. When we hit enter, now our tangent is even. Not to say that we should aim for this. I prefer to aim for more of an uneven tangent, just because it feels a bit more natural in my opinion. You're working looser at that point, instead of being very strict and choosing exact values. Sometimes you do need precise values, but often for character performances, I tend to stay away from those types of values. But I'll go to now close out of the property page. Let's go and have a look at our moving hold. I'll minimize the curve editor. We'll start back from the beginning and hit play. And take a look at that. Look how much weight we've added by making just a few changes. So it goes to show you the power of a moving hold, and this is just a simple example of that. So as you start to get more familiar with the animation tools in the software, go ahead and experiment and try to create moving holds of your own. As the character goes from point A to point B, add some anticipation, have the character hold there for a little bit longer, and then push them forward to point B. You'll notice that your animation will start to come to life at that point. Fantastic. So in this lesson, we learn how to add a moving hold with the help of tangency in 3ds Max. Now in the next lesson, we'll go ahead and wrap up the animation by animating the wire. Well, let's say we go ahead and get to it. Again, we'll block in our work, and then we'll start to add some polish afterwards. So selecting all 3 light controls, let's go ahead and check our key filters just to make sure that we're keyframing all properties we need. So there's position, there's rotation, that looks good. I'll go ahead and close this out. And on frame 0, we'll go ahead and create our first keyframe. We'll then go ahead and clone this to 32. Again, just hold down Shift and drag. Fantastic. And now, it's time to think about when the legs should remain planted and when they should actually leave the floor. So it looks like on about frame 15, they should still be planted. So on 15, I'll go there. I'm going to make sure that we create a keyframe. Nice. Now, we'll basically want to bring them up, and as we do, let's think about another really important principle of animation, that of squash and stretch. Yes, we do need to think about squash and stretch here. It's not only a volume thing, it also has to deal with our poses as well, because that helps to add more exaggeration and loosen up our characters. So as the turret leaps, we'll have the legs lock up just a little bit for some stretch, and then we'll have them create a compressed type of pose. And let's have that happen on about frame 24. So we'll go there, and we'll just translate the legs up. Let's add some exaggeration here so we can loosen up the turret and make this more exciting. It'll jump up. There's our squash. And now we need them to plant again. So we could have that happen on about frame 27. So all we need to do here is Alt right click to access our animate quad menu and choose transform to 0 to bring them back down. Cool. Let's go ahead and have a look at our animation. We'll hit play. Nice. Now it's a little rough, but it's getting there, right? Sweet. Now what I'd like to do next, let's go ahead and focus on the timing of it all. I want to make sure that when the legs lock up, it's not due to IK locking. I want to make sure that we have control over the lock, just so it looks natural. Because right now, due to inverse kinematics, the legs are being locked simply because they're being pulled away from the IK system. So all we need to do here is head over to the curve editor and add some more polish. Let's go ahead and right click, grab our curve editor. Alright, sweet. So from here, we can focus in on the position Z track of each object. So here's leg 01. I just skipped over leg 02. There it is. We'll go ahead and find the position Z track there. Sweet. And remember, that is 0 position, not from the frozen list. And just one more. Alright, there's leg 3, and there's the position list. So just go ahead and control click all 3. Nice. And now watch this. Let's go ahead and grab the keyframe on frame 15. If we were to hold down Shift and drag our tangent, you'll notice that we can use this to break our tangents. How cool. So what this does is it allows us to kind of, again, change our pose without having to add an extra key. Let's say we go ahead and have a look at the tangent that we changed to see what it does for the animation. So as you can see, that first leg there, it's up a bit higher than the others. So that's helping out a bit. I might go ahead and drop the tangent down some. I'll also go back to view and turn on interactive update just to make sure that it's not up so high, because it should still be locked just a bit, just so we can get that stretch in our gesture. But it should not be locked to a point where we get a lot of IK popping, because that's very nasty. And it makes the character feel CG. Sweet, so that looks better. So now that we figured out what to change on that keyframe here on 15, we can go ahead and start to change the other keys. We can go ahead and break our tangency from the toolbar at the top as well. You'll notice that we can unify our tangents if we need to. Go ahead and make sure that they all kind of move simultaneously instead of independently from each other. We can go ahead and unify them here. If I were to go ahead and unify our tangents and start to adjust the same tangent that we modified on the first leg, you'll notice that we get really nasty orientation in our tangent. To fix this, it's actually really simple. Just go ahead and use set tangents to auto. But do keep in mind that if you do have a broken tangent and you use set tangents to auto, that tangent is still going to remain broken. So in order to unify, you'd actually have to use the Unify Tangents tool. Alright, sweet. Let's go ahead and have a look at the animation now. We're trying to remove that locking. I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit more. Alright, great. So this should work out well. How about the others? Let's go ahead and adjust those. So I'll go ahead and bring them to the same orientation as the one that we tweaked. Fantastic. And now, to add some weight here, instead of having them ease into our last key, we can go ahead and break our tangency here. So watch this. It's going to be really exciting. We'll break our tangency. We'll start to bring this up just a bit more so we get a nice stomp when they finally hit the floor. Go ahead and bring our tangents up. I might also go ahead and adjust this key on 24, adjusting the orientation, just so that we have a smoother transition throughout the jump. Fantastic. So now, if we were to go ahead and hit play, we should notice better weight. How cool is that? So there's that stomp. And if you wanted it to be a bit more prominent, you could actually take the keyframe here on 27 and slide that forward just one frame to about 26. Let's go ahead and hit play. Boom. Boom. So now you truly feel the weight there, right? That's awesome. Super cool. So at this point, here's what we could do. We can go ahead and add some rotation to the feet, because right now they look very unnatural the way they're currently oriented. Let's do that. We'll grab our rotate gizmo. We'll make sure it's set to gimbal mode so we know the actual axis we're rotating in. And it also allows us to rotate along each object locally, so we can easily go through and kind of rotate the feet in the angle they need to be rotated simultaneously. So we can come in and we can say, alright, the feet need to be rotated down once they leave the floor on about frame 17, so we can go ahead and rotate them down there. And then we can go ahead and add some follow through. So as they start to come back down, we can go to 26, bring them up. Be careful not to go too far. As you can see, their swivel controls, if they get past the IK plane, that's when the legs flip. So you have to be really careful about that. You can animate these if you like, but I don't think that's necessary here. We just have to make sure they don't get too close to the IK system. And then, one frame after on 27, we can go ahead and zero out our orientation. So go ahead and Alt-right click and choose Transform to 0. So now we get a really nice foot stomp. And then what I'd like to do is go ahead and offset one of the controls just so that we can break up this twinning we're getting. That's when things happen at the same time, which is very unnatural. There has to be some type of offset, right? So go ahead and take our keys here on 26 and 27 of the rear leg, and we'll go ahead and slide those two keys down just one frame so it happens one frame after. Now let's go ahead and see what we've done to the animation. We'll hit play. How cool is that? So by simply offsetting one leg, now this feels very natural, right? How cool. So in this lesson, we learned a little bit more about our tangency, right? We learned how to break a keyframe's tangency and how to fix that if we add a little bit of follow through and overlap to the wire at the back of the turret. Let's go ahead and get to it. We'll grab our move gizmo. On frame 0, let's go ahead and create a keyframe. Let's transfer this to 32, and let's get going. So again, we're just adding follow through and overlap. So as the turret starts to move down, on about frame 3, we can go ahead and kind of bring it up for a bit of follow through here. Then, due to gravity and weight, it's going to go ahead and start falling down just a bit. And we can have that happen, let's say in about frame 8. We'll just go ahead and bring it down just slightly. Sweet. But now, we want it to come up for a bit of recoil after it has fallen down on frame 8. So we'll go ahead and bring it up just slightly on 12. Remember, it needs to be very subtle at this point. And there's that little bounce that we just added. Great. Now it's time to have it move down quite a bit. Not too much, of course, but quite a bit due to the force in the jump. So taking a look at this, looks like we can go ahead and bring it down on about 16. So we'll drop it. Great. And then for some overlap, it needs to move back up as the turret starts to move down. So we could have that happen, I'd say on about frame 26. Nice. And let's make sure that these poses that we've just set match the intensity of the jump. Wonderful. And now for a bit of recoil, as it falls, let's say on about frame 30, we'll go ahead and just translate it down. So it's a little bit lower than the key on 32. Let's go and have a look. If you need to, you can go to Tools, Manage Layers, and you can go ahead and hide the controls. That way we could just focus on the performance without any other distractions. We can now hit play. And take a look at that. Looks pretty natural, right? So we're getting some realism now by using one of those really important principles of animation that'll follow through and overlap. Good job. All right, sweet. So let's say we do this. We'll go ahead and now cycle the animation. So let's go ahead and bring those controls back. I'll head back to Manage Layers. We'll show our controls. If you want to, you could actually select them from here. You can go ahead and grab the layer, right-click, and choose Select Child Nodes. And with all of them selected, you can now basically right-click, go to your curve editor. Remember, under Show, you can make sure Auto Expand is set to Animated Auto Select as well, so you can quickly grab all of your animated properties. And at this point, it's just a matter of going to Edit, Controller, out of Range Types, and we'll now go ahead and choose Cycle. Click OK, and there you have it. So what this means is that we can set this to a gajillion amount of frames. Probably don't want to do that, but let's go ahead and increase our range by holding down Control-Alt and dragging with the right mouse button. And now let's go ahead and play this through. Remember, you can hide your controls if they are a bit distracting. Let's go and have a look at what we worked on. Sweet. So what we've done here in these last few lessons is we've learned how to not only work with the curve editor a bit more to create a more natural looking animation, we also learned some really important principles of animation that will help to make our work go from a state of being good to a state of being great and entertaining to watch. Sweet. So with that, that'll finish this lesson, and in the next lesson, we'll talk about your assignment for Volume 2, We learned about constraints, not only how to apply them, but then how to animate with them. We learned about the path constraint and how that can be used to create arcs that objects should travel along. And then we learned about trajectories and how we can use that tool to help enhance our arcs so that we can start to bring our work to a level of high quality. And then to wrap up the course, we delved further into the curve editor. We learned how to break our tangency. We also learned how to add a moving hole to an animation without having to add any extra keyframes. Again, that's super important because the last thing you want to do is clutter up your function curves. You have to think about the rest of the team. What if you had to hand your file off to another artist? Well, they don't want to deal with all of that mess in the curve editor, right? So do be very mindful of that. And if you'd like to learn more animation techniques, please take a look at animation blocking and polishing techniques in 3ds Max, where you'll learn how to create a quick animated sequence with a character. So I think you might find that interesting. And we also have our Introduction to Animation course that delves deeper into the animation tools of this software. So what I'd like you to do for your assignment is go ahead and animate another type of action. Feel free to work on the jump again just so you can get comfortable with it. You can get comfortable with adding weight to an animation, but then take it a step further. Try to see if you can animate a walk with the turret. And if you need to, have a look at our walk cycle course and use that as a guidance to help you bring this turret to life with a walk cycle of your own. All right, fantastic. So that's it for this lesson.